Now, before I say anything further, it is not only after Maria we've been talking about resilience in this country. Those of you who are familiar with the Growth and Social Protection Strategy, which has been in existence for the last 10 years, would recognize that a number of these interventions in this strategy speak to resilience, speak to sustainable livelihoods in our country. In agriculture, for example, the new technologies that we have implemented on the farms. We've moved away from yams being seasonal to yams being produced any time of the year. That's building resilience. Bringing in different varieties of plants, more climate resilient plants, more pest resilient plants. All of these things speak to the issue of resilience. But with regards to infrastructure, many critics, the first attempt was to go to the West Bridge to see why it collapsed. But the West Bridge was designed and constructed taking all of the hydrological studies of the Roosevelt River and building it in such a way that if we had an Erica again, and it did not take us very long to have a bigger Erica in the country, and the bridge survived unscathed. And the Roosevelt Enhancement Project, which we spoke about, and which we already had plans designed prior to Erica and Maria, is all that resilience, putting all of the cables, electrical cables underground, putting all of the telephone lines underground in ducts, building more sturdy and resilient river defenses to protect the city. All of this is what we meant when we spoke about and we articulated in budget and in speeches by the Prime Minister, in policy statements, policy documents. All of these things we were speaking about in a practical sense, what resilience is about, and building greater opportunities for sustainable livelihoods. And when we, as a country, as a government, have been speaking and advocating internationally and nationally about climate change, there are many who felt that we were wasting time going to talk about climate change in the rest of the world, and this is not, there's nothing to do with anything, but we have lived the truth of climate change and the impact it can have on our livelihoods, the impact it can have on an entire country. 226% of the GDP being washed away is extraordinary. And I have not met one single Dominican family who has not been negatively impacted by the hurricane. Not one. So these things do not discriminate on any front. And it's a reality that we will be facing in years to come. And therefore, as a country, we have to take due note of this. So what I would like for us as Dominicans and as public servants is for us to dutifully report to work, first and foremost. Not just to come to perform the tasks that each of us has performed over the years, but to report to duty in the name of the Commonwealth of Dominica. In the name of the Commonwealth of Dominica, and for the sake of current and future generations. You can join, is it a raffle they call it, or you can get a visa by going online and lottery, you know, or you can get a green card and so forth. And even if you were to leave, you will have family back here. So you will always be connected to this country. Because we have to appreciate that our country was brought to the edge of existence. on September 18, 2019. And many of you here, and I see the media here, I'm not sure whether you're recording this to play it publicly, and many of us in the country thought that this was the end of the world. Our immediate reaction was to give up. You've just built your home. Some of you were building your home and your roof gone, your plaster yet. You have a mortgage, and the bank may give you a little reprieve for 2 or 3 months, but you have to continue to pay. They're not reducing the interest rate. They will not be reducing the principal amount. All it's saying, well, look, you'll pay me a little more, a little later. Those who are invested have seen this washed away. You just put in investments in your small business, and this has been washed away. So at first, we survived on shock. Days after, we survived on relief. But next, we must survive on the outstanding performance of every person in this room. That's the only way the country is going to survive. If each of us are exemplary in the execution of our duties, there is no room for us to fall short in these circumstances. There's absolutely no room. Because nothing else is good enough outside of exemplary performance. Nothing else is good enough. And all of you here, you are the leadership of this country. It is not the Prime Minister alone. You are the leadership of this country. And therefore, leaders must lead. Leaders do not have the luxury of complaining. Leaders do not have the luxury of complaining. And a failure of one of us in here will cause the failure of all of us. And obviously our country. Because we have to appreciate that we're not in this to run a little department or a little ministry. We have to rebuild an entire nation. An entire nation. New schools, new hospitals, new homes, new roads. You name it. We have to rebuild these things for the entire generation. And we are in the process of rebuilding the entire nation, taking into consideration global realities and global complexities. People in the world are not going to give you something because you need it. We have to disabuse our minds in Dominica that people will give us help because we're Dominica, or because we'll be hit by a hurricane. That's not how global geopolitics and diplomacy work these days. That's not how it works these days. We as a country, we must matter to the world. We must matter to the world. And these days, you only matter to the world if you're flinging nuclear missiles across the oceans, if you're a safe harbor or haven for terrorists, or if you're on the front line of the fight against climate change. And it is the latter that makes Dominica relevant. There's some who criticize me for leaving Dominica and going to address the United Nations. But these people are short-sighted. It is our message to the world in a respectful but consistent and firm manner that has allowed the world to reach out to us. because we were hit at the time when there were many things happening at the same time. French Saint Martin, which is the dependent territory of the Republic of France. Dutch Saint Martin, which is a dependent territory, a part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Puerto Rico, which is part of the United States of America. Florida, Texas, that had come in a couple months before. You have the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar and Bangladesh. So there are a number of things that were happening at the same time. And in our case, we had no communication. Nobody could reach us, we could reach nobody. And therefore, we had to find a message to the world. But we have to be fair to ourselves and honest to ourselves as Dominicans. One of the major challenges we'll be facing with is one of implementation. Implementation. And of course, the issue of implementation is not only our fault. But we should not remove ourselves completely from it. In respect to donors, they make pledges, they provide you with money, but they make it difficult for you to get it. So you have that challenge. Make it difficult for you to get it and for you to spend it. But as I said, it is not only an external problem, because disasters are coordinating nightmares. Rebuilding is a coordinating nightmare. Managing donors and ministries and contractors is also a coordination nightmare. Just as the Permanent Secretary of Ministry of Public Works, and just clearing, clearing roads. The sleepless nights she and her CTO are having in going for these dozens and dozens of invoices that they've received. We cannot function in the present dispensation with business as usual. We have to certainly change some things, and very soon I will speak to you about the creed and how the creed fits in the whole strategy of the government, how it is vis-a-vis the public service, and what we must do to make it succeed. There are certain urgent interventions which the state must do, which the state has resources for, to ensure that we fill the gap and to ensure that we do not have a society that will go through more difficult pains than they are already going through. And if something is urgent, it ought not to take weeks, some for days. It ought not to take months. It has to be más rápido. And I am concerned that there might be still a tendency of business as usual. To getting things done. The cash grants to the vulnerable people. The cash grants to the farmers. The farmers, in my respect, should have already had the monies planting and spending. And they must be, in the preparation of his documents, there must be circumspection, there must be diligence. There must be transparency in the process of putting this list of beneficiaries together. If I am responsible for somebody and I've been responsible for somebody for 10 years. And in that case, let's say a district, as any state actor, you must be able to know your clients inside out. Your submission should not say that you do not even know the person's name. So these are things that we have to look at very, very, very carefully. Because, as I said earlier, we as leaders must not talk about problems. We have to talk about solutions. We cannot busy ourselves about protocols when people's roofs are still without even a tarpaulin. And there are people who depend on the state for their existence and survival. Another thing that we have to pay people who have provided us with service and pay them on time. And the ministries and departments concerned must ensure that the documentation in respect to ensuring that all the bases are covered are done so diligently and dutifully. Because you will have a cascading impact. Because sometimes you owe one person, that one person owes 50 people. And if you multiply that 50 people times 3 in a home or 4 in a home, you can understand the impact across the country. And my final point before I go into the creed is that what is needed now in Dominica is not brightness. What's needed in Dominica now, in my respectful view, is competence and a determination to make things happen correctly and efficiently in rapid time. What took us 30 minutes to do prior to Hurricane Maria should take us less than 10. If something requires just a signature, most of us have signatures, 0.000001 of a second to sign a document. Why should we leave it for tomorrow night? And if something happens, we can't come to work. And it stays there another day. And if something happens the following day, we cannot come to work. And we have people's lives depending on that simple signature. If I call an education officer, and I say, how many children are the vehicles at the Patricia Scotland Primary School? In this dispensation, you can't be guessing. You have to know. We have to know. In respect to creed, and perhaps if you time me, okay, because you have more important things to do than listening to me today, you know. In reflecting on the enormity of the task at hand, and recognizing that Maria did not wash away or blow away the pre-Maria functions of the state, of the public service. And recognizing that don't fool ourselves, don't kid ourselves, that there are not certain gaps within the state and certain competencies required in various departments within the state, areas in the state, that we within the public service we can do by ourselves. If any permanent secretary, any public officer, any head of department thinks they can do by themselves, you're fooling yourself. And this is a recipe for failure or disaster. And therefore, we decided to come up with this structure. We studied every country in the world which had a major disaster. Every country in the world which had a major disaster, including the 9/11 situation in the United States of America. And we consulted a wide range of experts. And we were led to Indonesia after the tsunami in Indonesia and the creation of the execution agency to oversee the rebuilding efforts post this tsunami in Indonesia. And we went even as far as engaging the executive director of this agency in Indonesia to hear from him his view. So we looked at Haiti, we looked at the United States, we looked at Indonesia, and there are several other parts of the world that we looked at where there were major disasters. In Nepal, a number of areas. And we were advised and we concluded that the agency in Indonesia had the best or the most success. And therefore we decided to adapt this agency to our situation. And we are calling it the Climate Resilient Execution Agency. Now, this agency is not there to replace the public service. It is there to complement the public service. It is here to work with you. But its success will rely heavily on the public service. And the intention there is, yes, we will have international experts in specific and targeted areas, but a number of public servants and, of course, citizens will be seconded to this agency. Bring to bear to the agency your own expertise, your own competencies, and also have some of the competencies transferred so you can come back to the public service and pass it on to the public servants. Now, what we will do is that, for example, we will sit with the Ministry of Public Works, look at all the projects the Ministry of Public Works has and has been doing, because the intention there is not to take all of what the Ministry of Public Works is doing and give to the CREED. Look at which of the projects we will assign to the CREED, and look at which of the projects we will ask the Ministry of Public Works to continue implementing on behalf of the state. The CREED has been receiving, I can tell you, extraordinary support from our donors. Extraordinary support. To the extent that the UK government, for DFID, also assigned a consultant to us to assist in putting some flesh to the bones of the CREED. And we, as I said to the public some time ago, we had engaged Professor Avinash Prasad, who has been exemplary in assisting us in putting this together. And for this, we are very grateful to you. So we will have the agency, and we have already been given commitments of funding for this agency by a couple of donors. So that funding is already committed. Once we finalize the documentation, then we will be accessing this funding from the agency. So we will have the CREED, then we will have a committee made up of donors. So countries that will contribute to the CREED's work will form part of an oversight committee to guide the working of the CREED, ensure that all of the good governance principles are adhered to, and the CREED is functioning according to its mandate. In the first instance, the CREED will receive executive authority, meaning a decision of the cabinet, but we will go to the parliament next year to have legislation passed to give it parliamentary authority. And we'll also have an advisory committee which will be chaired by the Prime Minister and made up of certain ministers and public servants and people outside of the public service who will act as an advisory committee to the CREED, giving the CREED day-to-day advisory policy instructions and so forth. And I've decided also to include the Parliament in the process, not only for the passage of legislation, but we will put in place a parliamentary committee made up of 5 members, 2 from the opposition, 2 from the government, and the Attorney General will be in this. So you have 5 members of parliament on this committee, providing parliamentary supervision, and I'm even mandating the executive director to come to parliament at certain times to report to the parliament on the workings of the creed, and parliament will have the opportunity to quiz the executive director on the function of the creed. And of course, the Public Accounts Committee, through its constitutional authorities, will have an opportunity to review the accounts of the creed. The creed will also have both internal and external auditing capacities. So there will be internal auditing and external auditing capacities. The number of so it will also have a coordination responsibility. So it will be coordinating all efforts with our donors on our behalf, and all the major interventions that will be taking place within our rebuilding efforts. And we'll also be giving the creed an implementation authority. So it will not only be coordinating our rebuilding efforts, but it will also be mandated in implementing certain key interventions within our rebuilding framework. And those will be articulated to them by way of decisions. The creed will be housed in the office of the Prime Minister. So I will have portfolio oversight for the creed, and the creed will report to the Prime Minister and of course to the Cabinet. And there are times, for example, a donor may say, well, look, I want to fund a particular intervention. And the donor may want the creed to implement this project on his behalf. And that also will be done to allow this to happen. And I said to you earlier, for this to work, it's going to require the support of everybody in this room. It's going to require the support of everybody in this room. And it's important for us to have this support from you. Because if we as a country fail on this attempt, we'll not have another opportunity at this. And we see the creed as a very important structure, because in addition to having the creed, we'll also be setting up a trust fund. And one donor in particular, which I will not name now, at the donors conference met me privately and said, look, we want to put in 5 million into the creed. If I tell you the currency, you will figure it out. But not 5 million EC, so I'll tell you. To advance it. Because as I said to you, there has been exceptional buy-in by the donor community. And the point I want to make to you again to reinforce the point is that we have become relevant because of a clearly articulated policy to make Dominica the first climate resilient nation in the world. And it is about ensuring that if we are visited by another storm, another hurricane, and the science is showing that the storms are becoming more ferocious and more frequent, that we'll be able to bounce back quicker than we are currently doing. That we will be able to withstand the impacts of these hurricanes and the storms better. That we will not have a situation where we will not be able to provide basic medical services to our citizens because there is no light, there is no water, and our roof blown off at the hospital. That our agriculture will be completely washed away. We'll be looking at resilient crops and resilient species to bring in our country. Look at the mapping of our farmlands to decide what should we grow here and what should we grow there. And this is why the Ministry of Agriculture has been promoting heavily the planting of potato, whether it's Irish or sweet potato, different varieties. Because we would recognize a lot of the root crops survive. You know, I harvested several bags of sweet potatoes after the hurricane. So we have to look at this thing differently. Or water systems. If we have the intake in the middle of the river, it doesn't take a bright person to recognize that if the river is building up, it will be washed away. And every year we have to be spending millions to fix these things. So one of the things that we engage in the UK government on, because as you recognize, the UK government has made certain commitments to us. The first 10 million euros, or 12 million euros, 2 of which will go, pounds, will go into the international agencies and also assisting with the Cash for Work program. But they'll be given to us 10 million pounds. And in my meeting with Prime Minister Theresa May on the margins of the one climate summit in Paris, and you have seen the British government issued a press release. They have made an additional 15 million pounds available to Dominica. So that's 25 million pounds that the British government is committing to us. That is in addition to what they have committed to the Lube Bacatel Road, which is still on the cards and remain a priority for the state. What we want to do with some of these monies, and we have not allocated all of it, and I've said to the British government, we need to bring in experts to assist us with water systems, to review our entire water network in the country, and to adopt more resilient water systems. What are the challenges? How can we make it more resilient? And then rebuild the water systems, because water is life, water is sanitation, water is too critical a need for us not to be water for several months. And there's still communities that have no water because of certain challenges. Notwithstanding the exemplary efforts of DOASCO, our terrain and the water system as they're constructed are susceptible to these disasters. And therefore, how do we make it more resilient? So in the designs of our hospitals, in the designs of our clinics, and we will not be only making them smart clinics, but also resilient clinics. So the design of the Marigot Hospital, which UNOPS is doing with the Mexican-funded Marigot Hospital, you will see in the design of this hospital, we're taking all of these elements into consideration. So that when a hurricane hits or storm hits, we'll be satisfied that we will be able to provide uninterrupted services. And if the services are interrupted, it will be for a much shorter period of time rather than an extended period of time. The infrastructure. Oh, you know, I mean, Dominic, with all his best efforts, and we have our friends from Cuba who have been exceptional helping us, and our friends from the region, you know, running the lines and so forth. But when you have every inch of electrical lines above ground and thousands of poles uprooted and broken across valleys and mountains, in every hamlet, in every cranny, in every village, in every street in Dominica, I mean, no matter how much people you have, how many people you have working on these lines, it will be a challenge. And therefore, we need to ensure that in communities, you don't know to have every line underground because of our topography. But in communities, those lines should be underground. And one of the things we're looking at, which we have not decided on, we're consulting further on this, is that the state may have to finance the construction of those docks and lease it to the companies. So it will be a revenue source that can also repay the infrastructure. And the idea is that I want to do is to put it in a special account so that if there is maintenance work to be done, or that money can also be used to repay the loans that we have to. So these are things that we're looking at. And this is not something we're going to be beseeching the telecommunications company or Dominica. This will be guided by legislation. It will be guided by legislation that you must do it. It's not a choice. You have to do it. But for now, I am grateful for the telecommunication companies and Dominic that they're all keen on doing this, because one of the setbacks we had in implementing the roads enhancement project was an unwillingness on their part to participate in that process. Okay? In respect to planning has been engaging themselves in reviewing the codes. They've been, based on independent advice, there's a view that the codes are by and large in order. But we will also be looking at the restructuring planning, and to have an independent team of inspectors, and on that team must have a structural engineer to inspect the construction of buildings and to give certification to every critical stage of these buildings. The state, the government, the public service will have to specify in contracts the standard and the quality and the type of material that you must use if you're going to build a structure for the government. It must not be left and should be left to the contractor to go and take a used piece of foam ply and a piece of foam ply has been used 5 or 6 times on different projects to use to make foam ply to construct a retaining wall for the government. There will be spelled out in this contract what needs to be done, how it needs to be done going forward. So these are things that we need to look at in respect to the whole strategy for the state, and ensuring that we can build greater resilience in our telecommunication systems. We still do not have access, as far as I've been told, to the gov, right? The issue of the safety and the protection of our information. As a matter of fact, I have already started discussing with certain governments with the intention of entering into some agreement with them, with one government, at least we have to settle with one government, to secure our information in the cloud. And I've spoken to the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Affairs, and we have documents, and also the Director of Telecommunications and the Minister, that the state, as a matter of urgency, needs to go out to tender on the state telecommunication services and to set certain minimum standards and considerations in these telecommunication services. I don't care what anybody tells me, we must have, and there is the technology. There are countries that have implemented such to allow our information to be protected and for us not to have a situation where we do not have access to some of the most basic forms of telecommunication services months after a hurricane. So we're looking at these things. We're looking at these things very carefully. In respect to zoning for housing, the legislation must be more specific in its language. So we'll be reviewing the legislation, planning legislation. And we'll be contracting the services of experts to come into communities that we have identified as vulnerable communities, and to look at the issue of declaring these areas a no construction zone. And it will not be left to the purview or the choice of the resident, because the state has a fundamental responsibility to the safety of the citizens. And so when a place is declared as a zone for no construction, people won't have the choice of going where they want, because the cost of reaching out to these people after a hurricane is beyond us. And therefore, a number of communities will be rebuilding new communities, similar to what we're doing for the residents of Petite Savanne, Coolibri Street. There's certain parts of Collioure that have to be relocated, and the list goes on. And even the issue of building in safer communities, and because people say, well, it's only after Hurricane Maria we're talking about this thing. In 2007, those of you who are students of modern history, I'm talking about, I'm trying to say modern history. In 2007, I told the residents of Campbell that you need to be relocated. Some agreed with me then, the majority did not. But every time I visit Campbell after a storm, people want to leave immediately after the storm. But once they see the little greenery coming back and the dashing, shooting back up, they change their minds. But I believe that the state needs to proceed with it, and the state must provision for it. And because these hurricanes really, these storms, what it really does in large measure, it exposes the vulnerabilities of many families. The many families who go and they build in a ravine, they don't do so because they're foolish or they don't care about life. But the reality is, they have to find a place to build a shelter for their families. Because for human existence and even animals, a place of shelter is critical. And they have no choice. So we have to provide for these families. And this is why we have to construct about 5,000 homes for the vulnerable in our community. 5,000 homes for the vulnerable community. So we have to do these things. And there are a number of pieces of legislation that we have to look at in ensuring that the human aspect of the development and the physical aspect of our strategy are facilitated by legislation and not simply by policy statements of the government. So these things are critical. I capture how much more time I have. Yeah. So my plea to you, my friends, is that we will all have different perspectives in life. We'll all have different views. We'll all think of how this should be done and how that should be done. What the Prime Minister should do, what the Prime Minister should say. And I will keep telling people, you know, share your views. Share it respectfully. Share it with the good intentions that you may have. Because the ideas are not, there's no monopoly in ideas. And you don't have to get me to call you to share your view. I think in the history of our country, I have been the most accessible Prime Minister. And those of you who know me, I don't believe in protocol. So you don't have to go through this person to get to me. And everybody has to put a little signature, a little initial on every through to get to me. What I like people to come to me to is not to lament on problems. You come to me, you say, look, this is the problem. This is the likely solution to it. And that's how we engage ourselves. I may not necessarily agree with you, and I may very well agree with you on your own perspective of things. Because I believe consultation is critical. People misunderstand what consultation is. They think consultation is instructions. But consultation is what it is. We listen to each other, and he who has the authority to take the decision will take that decision. Because I also have to live with the decisions I make. Because when I take decisions, and even if people advise me, they will be hiding under the bed or under their wife's or dress or something, you know. When issues arise, I don't have the luxury of hiding. And I have no intention of hiding when I take a decision, because every decision I take, you know, I want to ensure my conscience is clear on this. But we have continued goodwill in the regional international arena. There are people rooting for us, want us to succeed. The commitments are there. As you saw, the pledging conference in New York was very successful. People continue to make pledges as small as they are, because every dollar counts. So the future of Dominica is in our hands. And I've been told a story of a young boy and an old man. And the young boy had a bird in his hand. And he saw this old man coming up. And he said to his friend, he's going to trick the old man. And he told his friend, you see this bird? I'm going to ask the old man a question. A couple of questions. I'm going to ask him whether the bird is alive or dead. And if he says the bird is alive, I will squeeze the bird and kill it. And if he says the bird is dead, I will let the bird go. My dear brothers and sisters, Dominica is in your hand. The question is, are you going to squeeze Dominica and kill it, or are you going to let it soar to higher heights? We have a responsibility to future generations. Do not see yourselves as bystanders. Do not see yourselves as members of the audience. You're actors. You are leaders. And we should expect nothing from ourselves outside of excellence. And if we have demand excellence from ourselves, we should not allow mediocrity to be seen among our fold. Because what this has taught us, and future storms will teach us, is that it's going to get more frequent and it's going to get more ferocious. And many of us who thought that we had a strong house, after having spent a lot of money in this house, recognize that our house could not withstand the ferocity of these winds. And unfortunately, and sadly, many of us lost relatives and friends. And whatever we can do from a human standpoint, we have to do this. So I do not want to hear leaders just lamenting on problems or what should have been done or what could have been done. You have an opportunity now to implement a strategy that can make us more resilient as a nation, more resilient as a people, and to ensure our own sustainable survival. For me, as the leader of the country, I have declared my unwavering commitment to this country. And I have no intention of making any other country my home, temporarily or otherwise. And do it for Dominica. This is not for Roosevelt Skerrit. This is for Dominica. And I keep saying to people that some people who I see criticizing the country, they have more vested interests and they have benefited more from the country than anybody else. Because anybody who has anything in Dominica today got it from Dominica. Outside of John Keller, who brought money to Dominica, everybody who has anything in Dominica made it out of Dominicans and Dominica. And some of you people talk as if, well, they can go somewhere with their money. But all the money you got, my brother, is from here. And therefore, we have to look at these things from this perspective. And recognizing that whatever actions we take, whatever decisions we take, we're taking it for the good and the well-being of our own brothers and sisters. Because time waiteth for no man. Time is of essence in the circumstance. And our prudence, our exemplary performance, our efficiency will make a difference in a number of spheres in our society. It will determine how quickly we recover as a country. It will determine how quickly the private sector can rebuild their businesses and employ our own brothers and sisters who have been laid off. It will stem the potential slide in the rates of poverty in our country and reverse all of the gains that we've made. And no matter how big our house is, no matter what our salary is, no matter how secure our job is, if you're in a community and the next neighbor is poor, it's going to impact you. And we don't have to have children in schools to care about the well-being of our students. And we don't have to be a patient at the hospital to care about the well-being of the patients. Because with the thousands of farmers who've lost their daily bread, as we call it, we have to be very efficient in getting them back on their feet as quickly as possible, because that pays their mortgage, that pays for the pickup they have carrying their produce, that pays for the food and supplies, that pays for the daily survival. And I have made it clear that I have no intention as the Minister of Finance of having any IMF program in Dominica. But we have to continue to be prudent in the management of the finances of the state. We have to ensure that the fiscal policies are adhered to and maintained. And those of us who are charged the responsibilities in very critical areas must be diligent. Because what we have done as a country, as a government, must not be undervalued or underestimated. We have kept every one of the public servants, including the non-established. We have been dutifully paying our debts. The many creditors who we paid and who have interacted with, who have been surprised that we paid them after Maria. But that can only be sustained by our diligence, our dedication, our commitment, and our love for our country. And because we have to appreciate it, that if we do not do these things that I've spoken about, these good Christian duties, our very jobs will be at stake too. Because if the state is unable to maintain itself, it has to start chopping up. So we're doing this for ourselves, and we're also doing it for the country, or country Dominica. So I want to thank you for inviting me, CAPSEC, and to say to you and your colleagues that if our country is needing them more than ever before, the time is now. And of course, money will never be able to repay you or compensate you for the duties which you have to carry out. your reward will be elsewhere when the good Lord comes back to judge the living and the dead. And it will be what you have done for the least of your brothers. That's the question. And we are a very Christian society. You know, and many of you went to church on Sunday and then midnight mass on Monday, and you start another roll again on the weekend. And these days the churches are very long. They spend hours there, praise and worship, which is good. But these things have to be, it is by the fruits. You can know a tree. What tree is that? That's a breadfruit tree or a bread nut? You know, and when you see the fruit, you'll say, well, it's a bread nut. Sure, no problem. Maybe a bread nut tree. So, as you know, I am preparing myself for afterlife and politics. And I think I am landing